starting today by talking through today's headlines with Gyles, Brandreth and Alison. Phillips.
And obviously the tragic news of yesterday's terror attack in the Manchester synagogue is, of course, dominating the front pages today. 2 people were killed and 3 others are still in hospital after a man drove a car at members of the public and then stabbed others before being shot by police. And this took place in pretty much the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Alison.
It did. It took place on Yom Kippur, which was yesterday, and so people had gathered, and it was at Heaton Park Synagogue. And we understand what's happened this morning. The police have released the identities of the 2 men who tragically were killed. So that was a man called Adrian Dalby, who was 53, and 66-year-old Melvin Kravitz, who lived locally. And, of course, as you say, there were 3 other people also in hospital. And then also, as we know, that the attacker was shot dead at the scene, and then a woman and 2 other men are also being held in custody as sort of in connection with it. So it's just a terribly, terribly tragic, sad... And I think it's also the repercussions across the country. So there's been enhanced police presence outside synagogues across the whole country yesterday. And the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary and the Chancellor of Exchequer both all went to a synagogue last night as well for prayers. And it's just, I think, hit everybody, hasn't it, across the whole country? There's just the vulnerability, I think, of so many Jewish people within our communities, and also how much more work we need to do to eradicate the hate that leads to incidents such as this.
Yeah.
There's been ongoing apprehension of something like this happening for years among the Jewish community. People live in fear. And it's awful to feel people are living in fear in our country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just intolerable. And but this has been going on, and the Jewish community tries to protect itself. The feeling you have to protect yourself is extraordinary. There's an organisation called, I think, the Community Security Trust that I've come across, who seem to be very good at providing extra security around synagogues, around Jewish schools, where people may be gathering. But the fact that this is needed is frightening. And what I think people I know within the Jewish community is telling me is it has got worse in recent years. It's always tragically been part of our society, you know, going back to my parents' and grandparents' generation. But in recent years, it seems to have been getting worse, and people are alarmed and frightened and not quite sure what to do. And what we must all do is ensure that everybody in our country actually feels safe and secure to walk the streets, to go to school, to worship in their own way. It's essential. And I think everybody is agreed on that.
It's a basic right, isn't it, that we all are entitled to.
And, you know, a word for the police as well, because I was in my car yesterday listening, I suppose, 10 o'clock when the story started breaking, and then you see the timeline. And for the police to be called, and 7 minutes after they were alerted to the attack, the attacker was shot dead. You know, the police do get... I don't want to change tact, you know, your message is so important, but they get a bit of a bad rap, but that's incredible.
And that's incredible bravery, and in that situation, they are running towards an armed person, and at that point, they thought that he had a belt
explosive.
And it turned out it wasn't actually an explosive, but that's a kind of a technique, is to look like you have an explosive. So incredibly brave people. And also, as Gyles says, the members of the CST, the security people that would have been there as well, also incredibly brave.
Yeah, well, obviously our thoughts are with the friends and families of the victims and, of course, all those affected by this tragic event. Absolutely awful. OK, moving on to our next story. I mean, it's all over the news at the moment. Prince William reveals modern monarchy plans.
Yeah,
now, this is all from this interview, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, that he did with Canadian comedian. He's been on the show, actually. Lovely guy. Schitt Street star Eugene Levy. We saw how he made an entrance at Windsor Castle on a scooter, but he also opened up about his plans to change the monarchy. Take a look.
It's coming any second.
And tradition has a huge part of all this. But there's also points where you look at tradition and go, is that still fit for purpose today? Is that still the right thing to do?
It sounds like the monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda.
I mean, it's a phenomenal insight into his life, isn't it? It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Well done, Eugene, securing this scoop, and it is a scoop.
So how did he get it?
Well, he got it in a very simple way. I know because he told me. They simply sent in an email saying, we're doing this series around the world, Eugene going to different places, coming to Windsor. Would it be possible to meet Prince William?
Yeah.
And the email came back saying, yes, of course.
He's obviously a fan of the show.
Because,
Yeah.
well, he's not so much a fan of Schitt's Creek as of American Pie.
Oh,
That's
he
how
loves
he got to know
American
him.
Pie.
Also, Eugene Levy has the advantage of not being a British journalist. He is Toronto-based actor and came without an agenda.
Yeah.
What is also
So
interesting...
important, you're so right.
Yeah,
There's no
that's it.
podcast off the back of this.
No.
There's no,
Yeah,
like, big thing of social
nothing,
media. It's
there's
just
nothing
chat.
else. But interestingly, Eugene told me that there was no, you will talk about this, you won't talk about that. It was, yes, this is the date
Anything
that
you
suits us
want.
both, come along.
Yeah.
And he was waiting there. He was told he's going to arrive at this time in Windsor. He came in on the scooter. He had not been told, do I call him Sir? Do I call him Prince? Do I call him William? He had no briefing of any kind. And that, in a sense, I think is the change that William was talking about when he came to talk about change. Just a more normal, relaxed approach to the monarchy.
I mean, you get more out of somebody when someone
Yes.
is relaxed in that situation.
Definitely.
And he seems so relaxed. And they go to a pub in Windsor, and William's having a pint of cider, and that's at the point where he talks about the change that he can see coming, which I thought was quite pronounced because he used the word change several times. So it's not quite clear what that means, but it's going to be different.
But it's funny that lightness of touch and how, you know, lightly it appears to weigh on his shoulders. When I did the Earthshot Awards, I'm not from a monarchist family, right? I'm from an Irish family, you know. So the idea of using words like Your Majesty and stuff just is very alien to me and my family. So when I met him, when we did Earthshot, what struck me most was how he and his whole team are lightness of touch. Because I said, what do I call him? And I said, just call him Will. You know, it's absolutely, you know, and that's actually, and then that permeates through the whole, the whole team. And it's, you know, like you said, he wants the monarchy to be a
Normal.
21st century monarchy and fit for purpose.
I mean, with the late Queen Elizabeth II, so admired, there was always an invisible moat around her. Her children and her grandchildren, when they met her at the beginning of the day, would bow and curtsy to her. It's a totally different world. And I think he's indicating, I know that. But he also echoes the late Queen in that he did say in this conversation, tradition matters. I value tradition, but, you know, there will be changes. I don't think they're going to be seismic changes. I think it's more of tone and attitude, exactly the sort of thing you're describing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say also in the documentary discussed the relationship between the late Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. Let's take a look.
Relationship.
Yeah, I had a good relationship. My grandparents were of a different generation. I think when we were younger, it was harder to have that very close relationship because it was quite formal. But as they got older and I got older, it got warmer and warmer.
I think remarkably candid.
It's interesting.
Yes, I mean, they were very formal. I mean, I've heard this from other grandchildren who go for tea with the late Queen. It really was a proper formal tea. You were sitting up. You know, it wasn't quite Marmite sandwiches and, you know, being ridiculous.
But she's teaching, she's educating them,
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely.
For the etiquette.
And also, she was a lady towards the end of her life, in her 90s.
Yeah.
And she reflected that generation. I think as he grew older and her grandparents grew older, it became more relaxed and more larky.
Yeah.
I think he acknowledges that the late Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, was one of the funniest people he ever met. And so I think towards the end, they got on very, very well indeed.
Don't you find that with any relationship? It starts off, your parents are quite strict in the beginning.
Yes.
They're teaching you the way things are. And then as you get older, they become a friend, don't they? They become much nicer.
And when they're standing at the window in that clip, he can see his old school, Eton, out of the window, and he sort of says, yes, sometimes I would get off school and then just come up here for my tea. So that's great,
Crazy, isn't it? That's so cool. Prince William also lifted the lid on his life as a dad. Let's take a look.
It's about making sure that we can look after our families and look after our children in a way that we feel is best for their future. You try and make sure you don't do the same mistakes as your parents. I think we all try and do that. So sit and chat is really important. None of our children have any phones, which we're very strict about.
That is really interesting.
No phones for the children. What a great idea, Alison.
Yeah, but also I think that's very interesting when he says about not repeating the mistakes of your parents, because he also refers, I think, later on to his parents divorced when he was 8. And clearly, even up until that point, he'd probably witnessed all sorts of unhappiness in the home. Yeah. And I think clearly he has made it a real priority that he protects them in terms of what they see in the home, but also within the media as well.
And maybe if they have any disagreements, it's never done in front of the children.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's also sort of been said quite a lot that obviously Kate came from a very sort of happy, stable family, and William loved that when he was introduced into that, and I think that's what he's tried to create for his children.
Yeah.
He knows that a childhood lasts a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so what happened to him in his childhood has lasted his lifetime, and he wants to ensure that his children have a really happy childhood so they can have a happy and secure adulthood. His family, I think, is his #1 priority. And I think the difference between him and, say, the late Queen is that for her, it was duty first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Duty before everything else. And family would come second. And I think that he is trying to get a balancing act between family and duty, with the slight priority being family, understandably.
Yeah.
He also says at one point, he's asked, does anything ever overwhelm you about the job? And he says, not the job, I'm fine about the work, it's just my family. And obviously everything he's been through with his wife being poorly and his father being poorly, I think that was the sense of being overwhelmed. Yeah.
I think overall, this documentary, it wasn't staged, it was so natural. I think it's really classy, actually.
Really lovely. He comes across fantastic.
Yeah, it's a really good idea.
So go on then, before we finish, why are you dressed like that?
Priscilla Presley is in town.
We know, she's on the show.
Yeah, of course I know she's on the show. And she needs to be looked after by somebody of a similar generation. And that is the point. She's doing 4 shows over here.
Is that why you're wearing the suit?
She opened at the Prince Edward Theatre last Sunday. I was in an adjacent theatre, it must be said, with Joanna Lumley and Jim Broadbent. So Priscilla and I, we felt, well, we just sort of bonded, as you'll discover when you meet her later.
Unbelievable.
I thought you were hosting her show or something like that.
No,
Poor Lady Brandreth.
Yeah.
Here he is.
I know.
Trying to crack on to Elvis's wife.
Can I tell you, and when I get home, she'll be saying, "You're no Elvis."
Well, I don't know. Anyway.
Well done. Thank
hello.
you, too.
Thank you for visiting our This Morning YouTube channel. We upload tons of new content every single day. So hit the subscribe button, like all the videos, and don't miss out. We'll see you in the morning.